Hello and welcome to another episode of Unraveled. I'm Marvi Sirmed, and tonight we are pulling apart the layers of a diplomatic spectacle that made headlines worldwide. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's high profile visit to Washington, his meeting with President Donald Trump, and the grand promises of stronger Indo US ties. But beyond the photo ops, what really happened? What was achieved? What was ignored? And what are the ripple effects across South Asia? Was this truly a triumph for India? Or is this partnership more about Washington's long term strategic play? Tonight, we analyze every detail what was said, what was left unsaid, and more importantly, what it means for India, Pakistan, China, and the shifting balance of power in the region. Let's start with the trade deal because that's where all the big numbers were thrown around. Modi and Trump set an ambitious target, doubling bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030. That's an eye catching figure. But is it realistic? Now, here's the context. US India trade is currently around $160 billion annually, with the US enjoying a $36 billion trade surplus. India has long complained about US protectionism, particularly on steel and aluminium tariffs, while the US has been pushing India to open its markets further to American agriculture products, tech, and pharmaceuticals. The new trade commitments promise a partial easing of these issues, but only on Washington's terms. For instance, India has agreed to lower tariffs on select US goods, while the US is increasing energy exports to India. Sounds like a fair exchange. Well, maybe, but look closely, and you will see that this aligns perfectly with Washington's broader energy strategy, reducing India's dependence on Russian oil and Middle Eastern suppliers. The US is securing a major stake in India's energy market, and that gives it leverage over India's economic policies in the future. So, the question is, does this trade expansion actually benefits India, or does it just tie New Delhi closer to Washington's economic orbit? Now, let's talk about the big one, defense. This trip marked a major shift in US India military relations, with the possible sale of F 35 stealth fighter jets to India. If this deal goes through, it would be India's biggest ever defense acquisition from the US and a historic shift away from Russia, which has traditionally been India's top supplier of arms. For Washington, this is a masterstroke. The US has long wanted to pull India away from Russian arms dependence, and offering advanced fighter jets is the perfect bait. But what does it mean for India? Will this truly boost India's defense capabilities, or does it come with strings attached? Unlike Russia, the US imposes strict conditions on defense sales. Technology transfer is limited, maintenance contracts are long term and expensive, and Washington retains some control over how these weapons are used. India has always prided itself on strategic autonomy. So the real question is, how much control is India giving up in exchange for this deal? Moving on to the security front. The US India joint statement following the meeting included a direct reference to Pakistan, urging it to ensure its territory is not used for cross border terrorism. Expected? Yes. But predictable does not mean insignificant. It adds diplomatic pressure on Pakistan at a time when its ties with Washington already seem a bit strained. More importantly, one of Modi's key wins was securing US approval for the extradition of Tahawwur Rana, the alleged planner of 2008 Mumbai attacks. This is being hailed as a major counter-terrorism victory for India, a symbolic step towards justice. But let's pause for a moment. Why now? The case against Tahawwur Rana has been stalled for years, caught in a web of, legal delays and diplomatic maneuverings. So, what changed? Why did Washington suddenly greenlight his extradition at this precise moment? This raises a far bigger question. Was this a standalone decision or part of a larger diplomatic trade off? Did Modi have to offer strategic concessions elsewhere on trade, on defense, energy to secure this, symbolic yet politically valuable win? And if so, what did India quietly agree to in return? Of course, these are questions that may never be asked, let alone answered, especially in India's so called Godi media, where journalism often takes the backseat to government cheerleading. Perhaps we will get a prime time panel debate on how this extradition proves Modi's global dominance. Or maybe even a Bollywood style dramatization of Modi versus terror. But a real investigation into the fine print of this deal? Well, let's not hold our breath. Now, let's talk about what wasn't said. In their recent meeting, President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed topics such as weapons sales and trade and cross border terrorism and Tahawwur Rana, but conspicuously sidestepped discussions on human rights and the treatment of minorities. In India, over the last 10 years, we have seen crackdown on civil liberties, media censorship, the erosion of minority rights. Yet, not a word was uttered about these concerns in Washington. This omission is emblematic of a broader trend in Washington, where strategic interests often eclipse value based concerns. President Trump's foreign policy, especially, is characterized by a transactional approach that prioritizes national interests over the promotion of democratic ideals. This stance has led to a deprioritization of human rights issues in diplomatic engagements, especially with nations deemed pivotal to US strategic objectives. India, viewed as a counterbalance to China's influence in the Indo Pacific region, falls squarely into this category. Consequently, not just President Trump, not just Republicans, in fact, Washington's general refrain from critiquing India's internal policies has been largely bipartisan, focusing instead on bolstering economic and defense ties. It's hardly a secret that both Trump and Modi share a strongman leadership style, which further solidifies their rapport and mutual understanding. This personal chemistry reinforces a bilateral relationship where pragmatic considerations overshadow discussions on civil liberties and minority rights. While previous US administrations occasionally addressed such issues, the current approach signifies a shift towards realpolitik, where strategic alliances take precedence over advocacy for human rights or even the promotion of democracy. This strategic silence has not gone unnoticed. Rights groups and activists have expressed concern over the lack of public discourse on India's human rights record, especially given reports of increasing anti minority rhetoric and action within the country. However, the prevailing sentiment in Washington suggests that for now, geopolitical priorities will continue to dictate the tenor of US India relations, relegating human rights issues to the background. Finally, let's zoom out. How does this trip impact Pakistan, China, and South Asia in general? Well, coming to Pakistan's reaction, Islamabad sees the F 35 deal as a direct military threat, claiming it will disrupt the region's power balance. Pakistan's Foreign Office issued a sharp rebuke, calling the US India joint statement, quote, one sided and misleading, unquote. Now, expect even stronger Pakistan China military ties in response. Coming to China, Beijing views this growing Indo US partnership as a clear move to counter its influence in the Indo Pacific. China will likely intensify border disputes with India, strengthen military cooperation with Pakistan, and expand its Belt and Road Initiative investments to offset US influence. So, where does this leave us? Modi got his trade commitments, his military assurances, and his symbolic security win with the extradition of Tahawwur Rana. Trump, in return, secured strategic leverage over India, pushed New Delhi further into Washington's orbit, and strengthened the Indo Pacific alliance against China. But let's not mistake photo ops for policy shifts. The real test of this so called historic visit will be whether these deals materialize or remain mere political optics. India has to walk a fine line, balancing its relationship with Russia, China, and the US, all while facing domestic challenges of press freedom, democratic backsliding, and economic slowdowns. And while leaders like Trump and Modi celebrate their political victories, the question remains, who really benefits from these deals? The people of India, the people of US, or just the powerful elite who profit from defense contracts and trade deals and all the diplomatic maneuverings? Well, that's all for tonight on Unraveled. But before you go, let's keep this conversation going. If you enjoyed this analysis, hit that like button, share this episode, and subscribe to New Wave Global for more in depth journalism on South Asia and global politics. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't, and any question you have. What topics would you like us to cover in the next episodes? Which angles do you think we should explore further? This show is all about critical conversations, and your voice matters. Until next time, keep questioning, keep thinking, and keep watching. Oh, and stay informed, stay critical. Have a good one.